Mike Pompeo. He is also a Fox News contributor. Mr. Secretary, good to see you this Friday afternoon. In relation to all of this, increasing calls for the U.S. Olympic Committee to pull out of the Beijing Games that are coming up just less than a month from now. You have long advocated that position. As we approach the Olympic Games just weeks away now, what would you say to American athletes about their participation?
Well, John, thanks for having me on. Two thoughts come to mind immediately. First, for the athletes. Look, this is the pinnacle of their career for many of them. They spend years getting ready for these Olympics. I have great respect for them, and I love the Olympics themselves. They're a great sporting event. They're great for the world. But those people in the Chinese Communist Party know those athletes are coming. They're going to monitor every single thing they say, every single thing they do. They will keep that in the hands, the clutches of the Chinese Communist Party forever. And if one of those athletes dares to say what you just said, John, what you just said on the air, talks about what's happening to the Uyghurs in Western China, talks about the massive human rights violations, talks about Taiwan or Tiananmen Square. If one of those athletes should so much as talk about that in a disparaging way, it may be that the Chinese Communist Party decides, well, we just want to talk to them and keep them here a little bit longer. So I would tell them all that they need to make sure they understand the risks that are associated with traveling to the Chinese Communist Party's homeland, its capital of Beijing. Second, from the globe's perspective, from the world's perspective, we now have the world's largest American companies, many of them American, who are going to foist Chinese propaganda on the world. And Xi Jinping is going to stand on that stage, John, and tell them how great it is. And he's not going to talk about any of the things you just talked about, the terrible things he's done to his own people and the terrible things he's done to people all across the world by foisting this virus on all of us.
One of the big sponsors of the Olympics is the Coca-Cola Company, and here's what they said in a statement a little earlier today. Quote, "We believe the Olympic movement is a force for good, bringing people and countries together, and we're proud to use our name to raise its profile and support the world's most watched and revered international sporting event." Now, there's no question that the Olympics are a force for good, but they are also, like the 1936 Games were in Berlin, a powerful force of propaganda for a repressive regime.
John, that's what I was speaking to earlier. There's no doubt the Olympics are a force for good. But the International Olympic Committee, who's now become so entwined with the Chinese Communist Party, chose to, under Chinese coercion, not move these games when they knew they shouldn't have held them there. This is not the place. There are so many great places you could host an Olympics, but not in this tyrannical regime that is designed to do so many bad things to so many people, and who doesn't care about life in the way that we do and doesn't respect rights. So when I hear Coca-Cola say that what they've done is they've told half of the story, I suspect they'll make an awful lot of money off of advertising from these games. But they should know that what they are promoting, what their presence is promoting, is they are permitting Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party to tell a story that is fundamentally different about what's really happening not only inside of China, but Chinese efforts all across the world.
The last time the Olympic Committee boycotted an Olympics was 1980 in Moscow because of Russia's, or the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. Here's what Suzanne Lyons, who is the chairwoman of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, said in reflection on that. Quote, many, talking about the athletes, many never had the chance to compete at the Olympic Games again. To make matters worse, their sacrifice had arguably no diplomatic benefit. The Soviet Union stayed in Afghanistan for another decade. So she said the cost to the athletes is huge, and the diplomatic aspect of this doesn't do a whole lot. What do you say in response?
There's no doubt a boycott would cost these Olympic athletes a lot. If one of these athletes is detained inside of China, it'll cost that athlete and his family or her family an awful lot too, John. We should be mindful that there have been Americans detained. There have been Canadians that were detained for years during the Trump administration. This is not unheard of. The Canadian ambassador to the Chinese ambassador to Canada said, yeah, most people get to leave the country. This is not a place where we should have lots of Americans traveling under this kind of high-risk system. I won't get into the geopolitics of what happened in 1980. That's an awful long time ago. But I can promise you this. Xi Jinping is very happy that he's hosting these games, and he's going to get 2 weeks uninterrupted to broadcast how great his Communist Party is.
No question about that. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, good to catch up with you.
Thank you,
Hope you
John.
have a great weekend. Thank you.